Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Marvel Harry. In today's episode, we explore all Avengers adopted Harry at age 5, and each hero gave different ability, making him unbeatable wizard. Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1, The Boy in the Cupboard, the Man in the Armor. The energy signature had first appeared in JARVIS's passive sweep 14 months ago, flagged as anomalous, cross-referenced against 17 known categories of electromagnetic phenomena, matched to none of them, and routed automatically to Tony's low-priority queue, where it had accumulated 3 siblings and a cousin before Tony noticed any of them. He noticed them at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in a Zurich hotel room, which was where Tony did most of his best and worst thinking, and what he noticed was not the signatures individually but the pattern: Surrey, England, residential address. 14-month interval of irregular but escalating discharges, no registered tech, no known enhanced individual. The discharges happened at night mostly, and when they happened, the local power grid showed a microfluctuation consistent with a sudden draw and release, like something breathing. JARVIS, Tony had said to his ceiling, pull everything on 4 privet drive, little winging, Surrey. Standard Intel sweep will take approximately 11 minutes, JARVIS said, truncated, 3 minutes. The property is owned by Vernon and Petunia Dursley. Standard Council tax records: 2 vehicles, 1 child registered at the local primary. 1, there is an anomaly in the local registry, sir. Say it. A second child is listed on the property's electoral roll supplementary record as a dependent resident, but does not appear in school enrollment data, GP registration, or any local authority record from the past 3 years. The name on the record is Harry James Potter, born July 31st, 2000, and he would be 5 years old. Tony had stared at the ceiling for 6 seconds. A child on the registry with no school, no doctor, no extracurricular records, no library card. No vaccination record after 18 months. The energy discharges correlate temporally with the gap in his records. They begin approximately when his documentation stops. Book me a flight, Tony had said. You have the Zurich Summit presentation at JARVIS. Booking now, sir. He hadn't told anyone. This was, in retrospect, the first mistake, though it was also the only decision available to him at the time because he needed to see it first, needed the data before the committee, needed to not spend 6 hours on a call with Fury debating jurisdiction, while a child with no GP record sat somewhere in Surrey. Though he'd flown himself, the Mark VII from Zurich was 83 minutes. Tony spent the first 40 on the continental leg running every available record on the Potter name, which returned a surprising volume of encrypted material that should not have appeared in a standard search, and which JARVIS flagged twice as originating from a governmental source with no traceable registry. British, old. Something that predated the current filing systems by decades and had been only partially digitized. The encryption on these, Tony said. I have not encountered this particular encoding architecture, JARVIS said, with the tone he used for things he found genuinely interesting, which was rare. It is not technological in origin, or rather, it has been applied technologically in translation, but the underlying structure is not algorithmic. Then what is it? I don't know, sir. I find that invigorating. Tony had let it run. He looked at what he could read. A child, born under specific circumstances that the records described in language that was not clinical and not bureaucratic, but something closer to historical. Prophecy, one document said, in a font that looked handwritten even in digital form, a designation, the boy who lived. An assignment, placed under the protection of blood relatives at the address above, guardianship confirmed satisfactory by the office of APWB Dumbledore, Chief Warlock, satisfactory. Tony had put his tablet face down on the armrest and not picked it up again until they were over the channel. House was everything the records implied and worse. Tony had calibrated his expectations low, and then recalibrated lower, and still landed in the driveway of 4 Privet Drive, with something specific happening in his chest that he would not name because naming it would require processing it, and he was currently in information-gathering mode, which was a mode he had developed specifically for situations where processing would impair function. The neighborhood was quiet, mid-morning. The sky was doing the British thing where it was overcast without committing to rain, and every hedge was exactly the same height, and the birdbath had a ceramic frog sitting in it that had the blank, cheerful expression of decorative objects that existed to signal normalcy rather than achieve it. Thermal, Tony said. Scanning, JARVIS ran it twice. 1 heat signature, sub-staircase area, approximately 40 kilograms, stationary for the past, for at least the period I have been scanning, sir. Consistent with a resting child. Where's the family? Petunia Dursley departed at 8:42 this morning. Vernon Dursley has not been on the property since 6:55. The elder child, Dudley Dursley, departed with Petunia Dursley. The property is otherwise unoccupied. Tony walked up the front path. The petunias in the window boxes were pink and evenly spaced and had clearly been selected with intent. He registered them with the particular attention he gave to things that were trying very hard to say one thing about themselves. The front door lock took the Mark VII's precision tool 4 seconds. Tony stepped into the hallway. The house smelled of fabric softener and something boiled, and underneath both, the very faint ozone smell he associated with electromagnetic discharge. Faint, old, residual, the smell of something that had happened here many times and dissipated, but not entirely. It was the smell of the workshop after a bad test, and it was coming from beneath the stairs. He looked up first. The wall going up the staircase was photographs. 31 he counted before he stopped counting because the number wasn't the point, the specificity was. Fat blonde child, over and over. Birthday parties, paddling pools, holidays, Christmas, a trip that appeared to be Disneyland, a trip that appeared to be the seaside, a school portrait, another school portrait, another. 31 frames on a wall and not one face that wasn't the same face. Under all of it, a cupboard door. Not even an interior door with a handle. A plain cupboard door, painted white, with a latch bolted on the outside. A latch that locked from the outside. Tony stood in front of it and the information gathering mode ran at full capacity, and he still had to take a specific, deliberate breath before he crouched and opened it. Inside, a camp mattress. A blanket folded at the foot of it with the kind of geometric precision that only happened when the folding was a ritual rather than a preference. A shelf made from a plank balanced between 2 stacks of bricks, holding a broken toy soldier and a crayon stub and a small stack of exercise books. Crayon drawings tacked to the slanted wall with pushpins. A green figure that might have been a person or might have been a tree. A drawing of what looked like a very large dog. A drawing of a man in a red metal suit with enormous writing underneath that said "Flying Man Real." And in the back corner, sitting against the wall with his knees tucked precisely to his chest, a child. Black hair at architectural war with itself. Glasses held at the bridge with a twist of wire. A scar on his forehead shaped like something. Tony's pattern recognition wanted to say lightning bolt and then confirmed, lightning bolt. Wearing a t-shirt that read Dudley's 5th birthday in block letters across the chest, and which was so large it had slid off one shoulder and been tucked back. Trousers hemmed 5 or 6 times at the knee, the fabric thin and pale where the thread had been and gone and come back, green eyes. Looking at Tony with an expression that was not precisely fear. It was more like the expression of a system running a rapid diagnostic, assessing inputs, generating probability trees, determining optimal response, and the assessment was happening very fast and very quietly behind a face that had learned to give nothing away while all of that was going on. "Hello," the child said. His voice was quiet, not whispering, just calibrated to take up exactly as much space as required and no more. Tony said, "Hey." He said it because it was the only word available, which was a problem he had never previously experienced, and which he noted was probably diagnostic. "Are you here about the lights?" the child said. Tony glanced at the single bare bulb in the ceiling. "What lights?" "Sometimes I make them do things." The child looked up at the bulb too. "They go out or they go brighter or sometimes they go a color." He looked back at Tony. "I don't mean to, I'm sorry about it." Tony looked at the bulb. He looked at the child. He looked at the latch he was still holding on the outside of the door. "How long have you been in here?" he said. "Today." The child considered this as though it was a maths problem worth working carefully. "Since breakfast." "Mrs. Dursley said I could come out for dinner, and generally," Tony's voice was very even, "this room." "Is this your room?" The child looked at him with the specific patience of someone for whom this was a question with a self-evident answer. "Yes." Tony stood up. The standing was deliberate, because the alternative was staying crouched in front of the cupboard, doing something with his face that would not help either of them. He stood in the hallway of 4 Privet Drive and he breathed through his nose, measured 7 times, and he looked at the photographs going up the staircase, 31 of them, one child, not this one, and he looked at the latch. He went back. He crouched again. "My name's Tony," he said. "I work with some people, a team. I need you to come with me." The child, Harry Potter, age 5, 2 years of GP records, no school, no library card, looked at him steadily. "Mrs. Dursley said I shouldn't go places," he said. "I know, she'll be cross. I know that too." Tony extended his hand, palm up. It was not a gesture he used. He had watched Steve use it and cataloged its function, an offer, not a direction, a question with a physical form. "I'll sort it out with her, but I need you to come now." Harry looked at the extended hand. He looked at Tony's face with the diagnostic attention, running the full assessment, and then he reached forward and put his hand into Tony's, small fingers around 2 of Tony's, the grip careful and complete, and shuffled forward on the mattress and stood up. He was exactly knee-height on Tony. The t-shirt hung to his thighs. "Can I bring my book?" he said. "Yeah." "You can bring your book." Harry reached back and picked up the top exercise book from the shelf. He tucked it under his arm. He looked up at Tony with the expression of someone who has decided to commit to a direction and intends to see it through, and it was Tony cataloged it immediately and filed it at the highest priority under the label that read, simply and uncomfortably, "This matters." Walked out of 4 Privet Drive. Harry did not look back. The Quinjet was parked on a farm track a quarter-mile away, under a standard-grade holographic cloak that worked on everything except Natasha Romanoff, who was leaning against its hull with a British government mobile phone that she had definitely not had before today, and a camera with a telephoto lens, and the expression she wore when she had been running an operation in parallel with yours, and had been waiting for the right moment to appear. Harry looked at her, he looked at the jet, he looked at the holographic shimmer around it. "That's a plane," he said. "Very good," Natasha said. "It's invisible. Nearly." "How?" "Light-bending panels on the hull exterior," Tony said, "which redirect the observable spectrum around. Why am I explaining this? You're 5. "I'd still like to know," Harry said to Natasha, and she looked at him for a fraction of a second before making the face she made when something had surprised her, which on Natasha was almost invisible and therefore, for anyone who knew her, completely unmissable. She opened the jet. Inside, Tony pulled the jump seat down and patted it with his jacket, the good one, the Italian wool he'd worn to the summit, and Harry sat in it and did not comment on the jacket. JARVIS ran a quiet biometric sweep while they were taxiing. 39.2 kilograms, 108 centimeters, low-grade iron deficiency, caloric intake tracking at approximately 60% of age-appropriate baseline for the past several months. Tony looked at the readout and put it away before Harry could see his face. Natasha rode up front. She told Tony very quietly about the Ministry of Magic, about the registry, about the handler's report with the word satisfactory in it. Harry sat in the back with his exercise book open across his knees and ate a protein bar from the emergency kit, working through it without haste but without waste, the way you ate when the availability of food was not something you assumed, and the English countryside gave way to the Channel, gave way to the North Sea, and Tony flew northeast when they should have been going west, because he needed 17 minutes to organize his thoughts before entering Avengers Tower with a child. And the Atlantic was good for 17 minutes. The owl appeared over Belgium. It came out of an overcast sky at altitude, which should have been aerodynamically impossible for an owl, and it hit the windshield with one decisive tap and hovered there, defying physics with what Tony could only interpret as intention, carrying a small envelope in its talons. "That's a bird," Tony said. "It's an owl," JARVIS said. "Its wing beat frequency suggests. Why is it at altitude? Why is it keeping pace? We're doing 210 knots, sir. The owl appears undisturbed by this." Harry had put his exercise book down and was looking at the windshield with the first expression Tony had seen on him that was not managed. It broke open across his face and stayed, clear and bright and unguarded. A 5-year-old looking at a white owl keeping pace with a military jet and finding it the most wonderful thing he had ever seen. Tony opened the hatch. The owl came in, landed on the back of Harry's jump seat with great dignity, and deposited the envelope in his lap. Harry touched the wax seal very gently. "Don't open it," Natasha said from the front. Harry's hand stopped, immediate, fingers stilling against the paper. He lifted his hand back to his lap without comment. "I'm going to look at it first," Natasha said. Her tone was not authoritative. It was the tone she used when she trusted someone enough to explain rather than simply direct. "Is that all right?" "Yes," Harry said. He held it out, she took it. He watched it go with the careful stillness of someone tracking something that mattered while operating under the operational principle that tracking visibly was not allowed. The owl stayed on the back of the seat. Harry turned to look at it. It looked back at him. It had orange eyes that were far too intelligent for a bird, and it was doing what it did, which was apparently being calmly, comprehensively present. "Hello," Harry said to it. The owl ruffled its feathers. "Can I keep it?" Harry asked. "We'll see," Natasha said. Harry looked at the owl with an expression Tony would think about later. He took "we'll see" and he worked with it. He didn't push, he didn't deflate. He took the not yes and not no, and held it like something he intended to handle carefully, and he turned back to his exercise book and found his pencil, and wrote something Tony couldn't see. Tony flew northwest. Avengers Tower at 6:40 in the evening had the specific atmospheric conditions of a building that contained too many decisive people and not enough managed schedules. Bruce was in the sublab with the door closed and the green-tinted safety light on, which meant he was doing something either delicate or worrying, and the distinction between those categories had blurred over the years. Clint was in the ductwork. JARVIS tracked him by thermal signature and occasional wrapper crinkle, engaged in whatever Clint engaged in up there, which Tony had decided not to investigate on the principle that knowing would be worse than not knowing. Steve was in the kitchen making dinner for 6 people, because Steve made dinner for 6 people twice a week regardless of occupancy, because Steve had decided early that regular meals were the architecture of a home and was not wrong, and Tony had never told him he was not wrong because saying so out loud would have required a different face than Tony generally kept accessible. Thor was on the communal floor addressing the television. "Television," Thor said, "display the contest of rugby football. The one with the egg-shaped ball and the significant falling down. I have 17 matches that JARVIS began. The contest where the very large man collided with the other very large man, and both seemed gratified by the outcome. That describes 11 of the 17, sir. Then display them simultaneously. I will determine the correct one by feel." "Sir, the screen doesn't JARVIS by feel." Tony walked in carrying the situation, which was to say, Tony walked in, and Harry walked in beside him with Tony's hand at his back, and what happened to the room was the word situation would not quite cover. The 11 rugby matches on the screen, the cooking sounds, Thor mid-declaration, all of it stopped at different speeds as Harry Potter stepped into Avengers Tower and looked out at a city that was showing him 40 floors of lit glass and steel, and the whole dark beginning of an evening, and he went perfectly, utterly still. It wasn't the stillness of overwhelm, it was the stillness of something being received. Steve turned from the stove. He looked at Tony, he looked at Harry. The wooden spoon went into the spoon rest with a deliberate absence of haste, because Steve moved carefully when things were important, and he crossed the kitchen floor and crouched in front of Harry until he was at eye level and said, "Hi, I'm Steve, what's your name?" "Harry Potter," Harry said. He said it with the careful formality of someone whose name had been used against him often enough to make the presenting of it feel like a significant transaction. "How do you do? Good, thank you." Steve held the eye contact and did not make it too much. "Are you hungry?" "No, thank you," Harry said. Tony looked at the curve of Harry's ribs visible through the Dudley t-shirt and said nothing. "Okay," Steve said. "You don't have to eat." He stood back up. Over Harry's head his eyes found Tony's, and the communication between them was not words. It was the compressed, specific exchange of 2 people who had worked together for years and had learned each other's vocabulary of silence. Steve said, "I see it, I understand, we'll handle it correctly." Tony said, "Yeah, I know, just hold on." Thor had crossed the room. This was the thing about Thor. When something interested him, the distance between him and the thing became immediately irrelevant. He was across the communal floor in 3 strides, and going down on one knee in front of Harry with a kind of natural, unself-conscious ceremony. And he was enormous, 6'4", 250, wearing a Metallica shirt that was doing its best and a half-up braid that had been bothering Tony aesthetically for weeks. And he looked at Harry with the full weight of his attention, which was the kind of attention that made most adults uncomfortable. Harry looked back with complete equanimity. "I am Thor Odinson," Thor said, "son of Odin, prince of Asgard and protector of the 9 realms. I bid you welcome to this tower." Harry looked at him for a moment. "I know who you are," Harry said. Thor blinked. "You do." "There's a book." Harry held up the exercise book. On the back cover, in his careful oversized printing, was written in green crayon, "Things that are real but that Mrs. Dursley says are not real." The list underneath had 7 items. Tony at an angle could make out: magic, Norse gods, Nessie prob, flying, dragons ask, dark matter probably, Avengers definitely. Thor stared at this for a long moment of complete silence, and then his face went large and warm and genuine in the way it only went when something had genuinely, purely delighted him, without political or strategic complication. "I am on the list," he said. "Second," Harry said. "After magic." "Stark," Thor announced, rising to his full height. "This child is magnificent." "Yeah," Tony said. "He has a list, Stark, of true things that small-minded people told him were false, and he kept the list, and he has brought it here." Thor was now addressing the room generally in the manner of someone making an important historical observation. "This is the beginning of a saga. Can we not call it a saga?" Tony said. "It is demonstrably a saga. There will be trials. There will be dinner," Steve said from the kitchen, in the tone he used when he was managing Thor with the efficiency of long practice. "Thor, plates." Thor went to get plates. He was still describing the characteristics of a saga, to no one in particular as he went, with the energy of a person filing a formal declaration. Harry watched him go, then from above, from the kitchen's ventilation access, which JARVIS had quietly flagged as occupied, Barton C. For the past 40 minutes, a pair of boots appeared, and then legs, and then Clint Barton dropped out of the ceiling, ducked in the manner of someone for whom this was an entirely standard mode of entry, and landed on the kitchen counter in a controlled crouch, glanced at Harry, and said "huh" in a tone of mild professional interest. Harry looked at the vent, he looked at Clint, he looked back at the vent. "Were you in there on purpose?" Harry asked. "Yeah." Harry appeared to process this against several categories of existing knowledge about buildings and the people who lived in them. Is it good? He said. Mostly, Clint said. The east wing's got a weird corner. What makes it weird? Clint tilted his head. He was assessing Harry the way he assessed everything, not aggressively, just comprehensively, the specific professional thoroughness of someone who processed rooms for threat and opportunity simultaneously, and had been doing it so long the assessment was automatic. What he found, apparently, passed his criteria for something, because the professional look went sideways into something more like interest. Temperature difference, he said, about 3 degrees colder than the surrounding ductwork. I've been trying to figure out why. Maybe there's a join in the insulation, Harry said, or a gap where a bracket was moved. Clint looked at him. We had a cold spot in the cupboard, Harry said, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone providing relevant data. It was where the pipe bracket had been repositioned. The room absorbed this sentence. Steve, at the stove, turned very slightly away from the kitchen and then back. The motion was a few degrees and completely controlled, and Tony read it as clearly as a billboard. Clint said, "You want to see the good ones, the vents." Harry looked up at him with the contained brightness here, staying this time, not flickering out, and said, "Yes, please." "After dinner," Steve said, without looking up from the stove. "After dinner," Clint confirmed, and sat on the counter like he'd meant to be there all along. Bruce came up from the sublab at 7, drawn by the smell of food and the specific atmospheric change that JARVIS had logged in every metric it measured: temperature, ambient sound frequency, barometric, electromagnetic, which Bruce had not been told about but which he would have described if asked, and if being honest, as something important settling into place. He came up the stairs and stopped in the kitchen doorway. Harry was sitting at the kitchen island on a stool Steve had adjusted to exactly the right height using the lever mechanism on its base, which Steve had checked twice, because Steve checked things twice. He had a plate in front of him, and he was eating with the focused application of someone for whom the act of eating a meal at a table was not a given, and Steve was across the island apparently just also eating, which was not what Steve was doing. He was present in the room in the specific way he was present when someone needed the normalcy of company without the pressure of attention. Bruce stood in the doorway and watched Harry eat for a moment. Harry said without looking up, "Hello," Bruce said. "Hi, I'm Bruce." "I know," Harry said. "You're the scientist, one of several in this building. Tony's the engineer," Harry said, with the precision of someone drawing a professional distinction. "That's different." Bruce looked at Tony, who was across the kitchen leaning against the counter with coffee, and the expression of a person who was not going to say anything about the characterization. "It is different, yeah," Bruce said. "What kind of scientist?" Harry asked. "Physics, mostly, biochemistry." Bruce moved to the counter and poured tea from the pot Steve had left out. "Gamma radiation." Harry considered this, eating. "Is that the green part?" Bruce went very still in the way he went still before making a decision about a conversational direction. "Yes," he said finally, "that's the green part." Harry nodded. He did not ask follow-up questions. He moved on to the next item on his plate, with the clean efficiency of someone who understood when a topic had a door, and had registered the position of the door without testing it. Bruce looked at Tony again. Tony made a very small, very controlled gesture with his coffee cup that meant, "Yeah, I know." The team meeting happened at 9, when Harry was in the guest suite that had been designated, in JARVIS's records, in Tony's internal taxonomy, in the entirely unspoken consensus of every person in the tower, as Harry's room. He had eaten 2 helpings of dinner, the second one taken without invitation after Steve left the dish accessible, and said nothing about it. He had brushed his teeth with the toothbrush Natasha had located in the emergency supply kit, with the speed and efficiency she brought to all logistical problems. He had looked at the room, queen bed, window facing the city, adjoining bathroom, and the very specific temperature that Tony had quietly instructed JARVIS to maintain, because he had watched Harry rub his arms once when they came in from the autumn air, and that was all the data point he needed. And he had gotten into the bed and pulled the blanket up and been asleep in the time it took Tony to walk 3 rooms down and pour a second coffee, 41 paces. The team meeting had the structure of all their urgent ones, everyone standing or sitting at angles to each other, Clint on the back of the sofa, Bruce with both hands on the table, Natasha's hands nowhere visible, Steve standing with his arms loose, Thor on the floor because he preferred it. Tony stood at the head of the table because it was his table. "He stays," Tony said. "Yes," Steve said. "Obviously he stays," Natasha said. "He stays." Thor's voice, even modulated for indoors, hit the windows. "He stays, and he is a remarkable person, and I intend to tell him a story of considerable significance, and tomorrow," Steve said. "Tomorrow," Thor agreed. Clint said, "Yeah, obviously he stays. I was going to say that." 5 faces turned to Bruce. Bruce had his glasses on the table and his hands flat on the surface, and was looking at his tablet. which was displaying JARVIS's energy readings from the Privet Drive property, overlaid with the biometric data from the Quinjet scan. And the expression on his face was the careful, closed one he wore when he was doing mathematics that was disturbing him. The readings from that house, he said, these aren't minor discharges. The two biggest events register at a frequency I've only seen on instruments calibrated for interdimensional incursion events. This is a child who has been generating Asgardian combat-level magical output, uncontrolled, since approximately age 3. He paused. And nobody taught him anything, nobody monitored it, nobody intervened. He took the glasses off and put them back on. He's been managing it alone. The room held the weight of this for a moment. He's been managing everything alone, Natasha said. And he's good at it, Bruce said. That's what his baseline biometrics are extraordinary. His nervous system is running a constant low-level suppression protocol. He doesn't spike, he doesn't visibly distress. He performs stability, he looked up, which is not the same as being stable, and if we let that continue, if we treat it as a feature rather than addressing the underlying. We're not treating it as a feature, Tony said. I know you know that. I'm saying it out loud because we need to agree on it in this room before we start making plans. Agreed, Steve said. Agreed, everyone said, at intervals, and the intervals mattered. The owl was on the back of the sofa 6 inches from Clint's left shoulder. It had been there since they sat down. It appeared to be in attendance. The envelope, Steve said. Natasha produced it from her jacket, set it on the table. Ministry of Magic, official ministry seal. Tracking familiar, the owl followed a military jet across 3 countries, so we're not dealing with an organization that operates under conventional constraints. She paused, in the way she paused when she was deciding how much of a larger picture to frame. The Ministry of Magic is a British governmental body that operates in parallel to the standard governmental structure, magical jurisdiction. They have been tracking Harry since the night of his parents' deaths. His parents, Steve said, died when he was 15 months old, Natasha said, in a magical event that killed something. Something that had been killing people for years. Harry survived it. The magical community calls him the boy who lived. She paused. They've been treating him as a resource ever since. Silence, not the silence of people who had nothing to say. The silence of people who were each, separately, having a specific response that they were managing with varying degrees of success. They'll want him back, Clint said. They will, Natasha confirmed. The envelope is an official notification of unregistered magical entity movement. They know he left the property. She looked at the owl. I kept the letter. I have not given the owl any return communication. It has accepted this situation with impressive professionalism. The owl ruffled its feathers in a way that might have been agreement. Guardianship, Steve said. In the morning, Tony said. All 6, Steve said, not a question. All 6, Tony confirmed. Steve looked at the table, then at each face in turn, the deliberate round he did when he was taking a reading of the room. What he found appeared to satisfy him. He'll need time, Steve said. Whatever we do, we move at his pace. Not ours, he paused. He's been given the message his entire life that his needs are secondary to everyone else's. We don't replicate that even with good intentions. Especially with good intentions, Bruce said. Yeah, Steve said, especially. The city below continued its indifferent, enormous business. The owl ate half of a protein bar. Thor offered it with great ceremony. Clint dropped back through the kitchen vent to retrieve a specific snack he'd cached up there 3 days ago. Bruce ran the energy readings a 4th time. Natasha read the envelope's contents twice and put it in her jacket and said nothing about what else she'd seen in the encrypted files. Tony poured a 3rd coffee. He stood at the window with it, looking down at the lit city, and he thought about a plank balanced on 2 stacks of bricks, and a crayon stub, and a broken toy soldier, and Flying Man real written in big green letters, and a child who said I don't mean to, I'm sorry about it, about making lights do extraordinary things in the dark. He thought about the latch on the outside of the door. He did not open the file. He poured the coffee out after 2 sips because his hands were doing something he didn't want to examine, and he put the mug in the sink, and he went back to the workshop. JARVIS flagged Harry's movement at 11:14. Not an alarm. A quiet notification, guest suite occupant, mobile heading residential corridor, direction, workshop in the manner of a system that had been monitoring a new resident and had calibrated quickly to the understanding that waking and moving at unusual hours was not, for the people in this building, a cause for concern. Tony was at the bench not working on the gauntlet. He was sitting in front of the gauntlet's disassembled components and looking at them in the way he looked at problems he was avoiding, which involved knowing exactly what the solution was and choosing not to implement it while he thought about other things. Harry appeared in the workshop doorway. He was in the oversized t-shirt, bare feet on the threshold, and his glasses were on slightly crooked, pushed up the nose in a way that said he'd put them on in the dark by feel. He stood in the doorway and looked at the workshop, the benches, the tools in their geographic precision, the half-assembled components arranged with the specific logic of an ongoing conversation between Tony and the problem, with the attentive, structural expression. He did not touch anything. He was standing perfectly still, and the workshop was doing something that only Harry's presence did, which was hum very slightly at a frequency Tony's instruments clocked as ambient, warm, resonant. Not loud, not threatening. Like a tuning fork held near a related pitch. "Hey," Tony said. Harry turned without flinching. He had heard Tony, which was still, every time, the wrong answer, because Tony moved silently on the workshop floor by habit and design. "Sorry," Harry said. "I woke up. Don't apologize." "You can come in." Harry came in. He moved between the benches with the careful respect of someone who understood that arrangements like Tony's had a logic, and crossed to the nearest bench, and stood in front of the Mark VII's left gauntlet assembly. He did not touch it, he looked at it. "What does it do?" he said. "Generates directional energy fields." Repulsor technology. Tony came around to stand next to him. Left hand is the precision instrument, smaller scale work. The right's more power, less direction. Harry nodded. He was looking at the components with the mapping attention, tracking relationships. "That piece is wrong," he said. He pointed, with one finger extended and not quite touching, at a microcoil Tony had set to the side of the assembly 2 days ago and not yet resolved. Tony picked up the coil, turned it, looked at the housing. He had been running the problem continuously for 48 hours. Mark VII's left-hand harmonic resonance was off by a margin that was functionally negligible in most applications, but that produced a rounding error in the precision work, and the rounding error compounded over repeated operations, and the source was somewhere in the microcoil's housing orientation, and he had been through the calculations 4 times and kept landing at 11 degrees off standard and not trusting it because 11 degrees felt empirically wrong even though the mathematics said. "How do you know it's wrong?" Tony said. "It feels off," Harry said. He looked at Tony. "Like a note that's close but not right. Can you feel that?" "I don't know," Tony said. "I work from readouts." Harry was quiet for a moment. "I feel it," he said, "when something's wrong in a system. I felt it in the cupboard with the light fittings. The one above my mattress had a loose connection and I could always feel it." He paused. "Is that strange?" Tony looked at him. He looked at the coil. He placed it in the housing at 11 degrees offset. He made the connection. The gauntlet assembly lit on first activation for the first time in 9 days, and the harmonic readout on Tony's display resolved from the broken oscillating line it had been producing into a clean, uninterrupted wave. Tony put the gauntlet down. He sat on the workshop floor. It was not a decision. His legs made it for him, efficiently and without consultation, because sometimes a body processed things faster than a mind would like. Harry looked at him sitting on the floor with the calm interest he brought to all new developments. Then he sat down too, cross-legged. He put his exercise book on his knees, found his pencil, and opened to a fresh page. "Do you feel it?" Tony said. "When systems are right, not just when they're off." Harry thought about this, pencil poised. "It's different," he said. "When it's right, it doesn't feel like anything, really. It's just quiet. Like when a word is the right word and you stop looking." Tony looked at the clean wave on his display. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly what it's like." Harry wrote something in the exercise book. Tony didn't look directly at it. JARVIS read it, cataloged it, stored it, in the way JARVIS cataloged everything that mattered, quietly, completely, permanently. Avengers Tower, New York City real. They sat on the workshop floor, Harry and Tony, in the blue-white light from the gauntlet assembly, and the city went on being the city outside, and upstairs Steve's kitchen was clean and ready for the morning, and Thor's Metallica shirt was folded over a chair back, and somewhere in the ductwork Clint slept in a nest of padded blankets he'd built in the widest section above the east wing, in which he had never once mentioned or explained. Harry worked on the exercise book. He was doing maths, not the maths in the school exercise books Tony had seen in the cupboard, which had been age-appropriate Year 1 edition, but something else, something he was generating himself from the components visible around the workshop, estimating dimensions and weights and relationships between systems, writing the logic out in the same careful, large printing. Tony watched him work. "I'm going to ask you something," Tony said. Harry looked up. "Do you want to stay here?" Harry looked at the gauntlet, lit and clean on the bench. He looked at the window and the city inside it. He looked at his own hands, pencil held lightly. "Steve said there would be pancakes in the morning," he said. "Yeah. And Clint said he'd show me the good vents. His name is Clint, yeah. And Thor said," Harry paused. "He said he'd tell me a story, but I was asleep already." He turned the pencil in his fingers. "I'd like to hear the story. That can be arranged," Tony said. Thor tells stories at the slightest provocation. Harry almost smiled. It was close and quick, and then it pulled back. The way things pulled back on Harry, the way everything moved toward him and then learned caution. He looked at the exercise book. "I'd like to stay," he said, if it's all right." Tony looked at the clean wave on the display. He thought about a list of true things written in green crayon on the back of an exercise book. He thought about a child who touched a frequency problem with his attention and resolved it the way you resolved something that had been waiting for the right listener. "It's more than all right," Tony said. Harry wrote something else in the exercise book and closed it. He sat for a while longer on the workshop floor, and Tony sat beside him, and the gauntlet held its clean frequency and lit them both in the same light. Outside, the white owl, still uncaged, sitting on the windowsill of the room 3 doors down, turned its head toward the workshop and then away, satisfied with whatever conclusion it had reached, and settled its wings and kept its own counsel. Chapter 2, Letters, Lawyers, and the Specific Gravity of a 5-year-old 3 weeks was not a long time to learn a person. Tony had run the numbers anyway, because numbers were what he had, and what the numbers said was 504 hours of observable data, cross-referenced against JARVIS's continuous ambient monitoring, biometric baselines, workshop footage, and the 41 pace corridor between Tony's room and Harry's that Tony had walked at irregular hours more times than he was going to count or discuss. 3 weeks of dinners and vent exploration, and Thor's nightly escalating sagas and Bruce's careful, engineering-framed breathing lessons and Natasha's coloring sessions that were not about coloring. 3 weeks and Harry Potter had not once asked for anything. This was the data point that kept surfacing. Not his magical output, which was extraordinary and getting more so as the tower's ambient field interacted with it in ways Bruce was logging with growing fascination. Not his intelligence, which Tony had stopped trying to bracket against age-appropriate metrics because the metrics were plainly the wrong instrument. Not the reflexes, which Natasha had started noting in quiet shorthand. He moved before I reached for the pen. He was at the window before the car alarm started. He knew, and which pointed towards something that was not trained but that was absolutely functional. Harry Potter did not ask for anything. He said thank you for everything. He cleared his plate from the table even when nobody had asked him to. He made his bed with the same geometric precision as the blanket in the cupboard, which Tony did not think about unless he was thinking about it, which was often. He flinched when Thor laughed too suddenly, not dramatically, a contained, immediate physical revision, shoulders coming in a 1/4 inch, and then releasing and then stayed in the room, because he had learned already that Thor's loudness was not the prelude to anything. On day 11, Tony had found him in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, wiping down a counter that was already clean. He'd stood in the doorway and watched for a moment, and then said, as neutrally as he could manage, "You don't have to do that." Harry had looked at the cloth in his hand. "I know," he said. He put it down. He looked at the counter. He appeared to be working out what the correct response to this new information was, now that it had been provided. "You can if you want to," Tony said, "if it's a thing you like doing." Harry considered this distinction with the precision he gave to problems. "I don't think I like doing it," he said finally. "I think I do it because otherwise something happens." "Nothing's going to happen," Tony said. Harry looked at him. He had the expression of someone receiving information that was not yet supported by enough evidence to be fully weighted. He was not dismissing it. He was filing it under plausible, pending confirmation. "Okay," he said. He left the cloth on the counter and went to the kitchen island and sat on his stool and picked up the maths Tony had left there, not arranged, just left in the course of bringing his coffee out, entirely without intention, and began working through it. Tony made breakfast for 2 and put a plate in front of him without comment. That was day 11. This was day 22, and the morning had been excellent. Pancakes, which Steve had expanded to an every morning offering, with the quiet strategic intelligence of someone who understood that consistent small comforts were the architecture of trust. Harry at the island working through a frequency problem Tony had sketched on a paper napkin the night before, which Harry had kept and folded into the exercise book with the care he gave to things he intended to return to. Thor on the sofa narrating, along to an audiobook of Beowulf that had abandoned the recording entirely 30 minutes in. Clint in the ceiling, present and accounted for, occasionally dropping a granola bar through the vent grate when he felt the kitchen's snack situation was inadequate. Bruce at the counter with green tea, reading, his back to the room, his shoulders doing the thing they did when he was comfortable, not square, not tight, just present in the space without bracing for it. Steve flipping the last pancake, and then at 9:47, JARVIS said, "Sir, the lobby has 3 visitors who declined standard intake," presented a wax-sealed document to the front desk attendant, and have left the attendant in a state of some confusion about the sequence of events leading to her current position. The kitchen went from good morning to operational in the time it took Steve to set the spatula down, not dramatically, not with announcement. The room's temperature did not change and nobody's voice did, but something shifted in the specific quality of how every person in it was occupying their body, the way a building's structure shifts fractionally before weather, and anyone standing in it feels the change in their feet before they understand it. Harry was already still. His pencil had stopped on the napkin problem. His head had not moved, but his eyes were doing the diagnostic work, reading the room's shift, tracking it in the people around him with the somatic intelligence that Natasha had been carefully, methodically developing through 17 sessions of What Do You Notice? And what he noticed now was evident in the set of his shoulders, and the way his hands had gone to his lap, pencil held between both palms rather than working. "Ministry," Natasha said. Her voice was the same as it always was, precise, economical, room temperature. "Ministry," Tony confirmed. Harry looked at the kitchen counter. At the half-eaten pancake on his plate, at the napkin problem, he put the pencil down, put it down carefully, parallel to the napkin's edge, and slid off the stool. "They're here for me," he said. "We don't know," Steve started. "They're here for me," not inflected, not frightened. Factual the way 2 + 2 was factual, the way 11 degrees offset was factual. It's been 3 weeks and the owl hasn't been sent back. "They came themselves," he paused. "I knew they would." Natasha was at the counter getting her jacket. "Harry." He looked at her. "You stay up here." "I know," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The 4 words landed in the room, and each person received them differently. Tony felt something unlock in his chest that he did not name. Steve's expression went from controlled assessment to something quieter and more resolved. Bruce, who had turned from the counter, looked at his hands. Natasha met Harry's eyes for 1 second, and then moved to the elevator with the unhurried precision of someone who is never late because they are always already in position. "JARVIS," Tony said, pulling the single gauntlet from the workshop carry rig on the back of his chair. He'd started wearing it habitually 2 weeks ago. "Weight on the forearm, not examined. Who are we dealing with?" The lead individual is female, approximately 55, presenting in robes of a pink consistent with what I can only describe as aggressive pleasantness. She's carrying a clipboard and smiling in a manner my facial recognition software flags as statistically inconsistent with genuine positive affect. She gave the front desk attendant a name, but the attendant is currently not certain she heard it correctly. The other 2, male, both gray robes. Stance consistent with enforcement rather than administrative function. A brief pause. "They are carrying wands." I want to note that sentence felt unusual to say. "Join the club," Tony said, and went to the elevator. Steve was already in it. The lobby of Avengers Tower made arguments without speaking. Made them through 40 feet of engineered glass, through the specific authority of polished concrete that had been chosen not for luxury, but for permanence, through the monolithic front desk that communicated, in the visual grammar of institutional architecture, that the organization operating from this building did things at a scale that conventional buildings could not contain. 3 people in robes in the middle of it looked like a footnote that had wandered into the main text. The woman was exactly what JARVIS's assessment had indicated, and then some. The pink was definitive, bow, cardigan, the barrel of her clipboard. Her face had a quality of arranged pleasantness that was the result of considerable practice, and the eyes above it were the eyes of an administrator who had spent years resolving the tension between what she wanted to do and what she was authorized to do by finding paperwork that closed the distance. She looked at Steve Rogers and made a visible recalculation that she did not let reach her expression. "Good morning," she said, with the warmth of a memo marked urgent. "My name is Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister for Magic, representing the Office of Unregistered Magical Entities in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement." She extended a card. It was cream, heavy stock, and had a ministry seal embossed in gold. "We are here regarding an unregistered magical child, classified Omega, currently believed to be housed within this facility, without authorization or appropriate oversight. We are here to facilitate his safe return to ministry-designated care." Steve took the card. He looked at it. He placed it in his back pocket. "Do you have documentation," he said, "from a legal authority recognized by the U.S. federal government or the state of New York, authorizing the removal of a child from this building?" Umbridge's smile held. "The magical governance framework does not operate under." "I understand that," Steve said, "and I respect that different jurisdictions have different frameworks. We're in New York. This building is in New York. A child who lives in this building is in New York." He paused. "So I'm asking whether you have documentation from an authority with standing in New York. The International Statute of Magical Secrecy provides for. I'd need that in writing, verified, through channels I can confirm." He gestured to the seating area, clean, spare, unambiguous. "You're welcome to wait while our legal team reviews your credentials." Umbridge looked at him with the assessment that people gave Steve when they were determining how much of what they were seeing was performance and how much was structure. She arrived correctly at the answer that it was all structure. She looked at Tony. Tony was to Steve's left, gauntlet on his right hand at rest, charged at 30%, which was not operational but was not nothing. He was wearing a t-shirt and the particular expression he wore when he had already run the scenario and knew how it ended, and was giving the other party the courtesy of playing it out. "Mr. Stark," Umbridge said, redirecting with the smooth efficiency of someone who worked with resistant parties professionally. "I understand your concern for the child's welfare, and I want to assure you that the Ministry of Magic has Harry Potter's best interests at its absolute." "I have your handler's report," Tony said. Umbridge stopped, the one describing his living situation at 4 Privet Drive as satisfactory. Tony tilted his head. "I also have 17 energy discharge records from that address over 14 months, none of which generated a welfare check. I have GP records that stop at 18 months. I have a local authority dependent registration that no one ever followed up on." He paused. "I have photographs of where he was living." Something moved in Umbridge's eyes, not shame, not guilt. Something closer to recalibration, the look of someone reassessing the documentary terrain. "The placement was made in exceptionally difficult circumstances," she said, and her voice had dropped the warmth and gone to something more direct, "in order to protect the child from forces that—" "He was in a cupboard," Tony said. "The lobby held this." One of the gray-robed men shifted his weight slightly. The other kept very still. Natasha, standing 6 feet behind Tony at a positioning angle that would not be obvious until it was relevant, tracked both of them in her peripheral field and said nothing. "The Ministry of Magic," Umbridge continued, and now the voice was entirely administrative, the warmth entirely gone, the clipboard coming up slightly like a raised shield, "has legal and moral guardianship responsibilities for every magical child born within its registry. Harry Potter has been classified at the highest risk tier since the age of 15 months. His power output is uncontrolled, it is dangerous, and it is escalating. He requires specialized management that this facility, however impressive its technological resources, is fundamentally unequipped to." "We filed for guardianship this morning," Steve said. She stopped mid-sentence. "3 jurisdictions," Steve said. "U.S. Federal Family Court, State of New York, and an international child welfare provision under a treaty the UK is a signatory to, administered through the UN. We've retained a specialist in magical human jurisdictional law, who advises that the ministry's claim to jurisdiction over a magical child residing on U.S. soil is, and I'm quoting, substantially complicated by those filings." He paused. "Our attorney is Pepper Potts. You may want to brief your legal department before any next steps." Umbridge's clipboard came down. She looked at Steve Rogers. She looked at Tony Stark. She looked at the lobby around her, the architectural argument it made continuously about the scale of what operated here, and she looked at the 2 gray-robed men behind her, and something passed between them that was not communication so much as mutual acknowledgement of changed conditions. "This," she said in a voice that had shed all pretense and arrived at what it actually was, precise, cold, and absolutely certain it would be back, "is not finished." "No," Steve said, "it isn't. But for today, you're going to leave, and you're going to take your people, and you're going to communicate to the minister that we welcome any further correspondence through our attorney's office." He held eye contact with a steadiness that was not aggressive and not warm and was simply immovable. "Have a good morning." Umbridge turned. The gray-robed man on the left, not the still one, the one who had shifted weight, the one whose right hand had been moving in a gradual arc towards something at his belt, moved. He was quick. Properly trained quick, not civilian quick, the speed of someone who had done this enough times that the motion preceded the decision. The wand came up and the red light came out of it in a bolt aimed low, aimed past Steve's shoulder at the space behind him, and it crossed the lobby in the time it took Tony to pull the gauntlet up, and it hit Natasha. She went down. Not hard, she rolled the fall, professional and immediate, already managing the stun's interference even as she hit the floor, but she went down, and Tony's gauntlet was charged and aimed at the source before she stopped moving, and Steve's shield was out, the compact form unfolded and braced, and the lobby had gone from the end of a negotiation to something else entirely in 0.9 seconds. The elevator opened. Tony did not look immediately. He held his aim on the gray-robed man and processed the elevator with his peripheral field, and what he found there made him process it again, directly, because the peripheral result had been incorrect. Harry was in the elevator, bare feet on the lobby floor, the MIT sweatshirt cut down by Steve, Massachusetts Institute of Technology across his chest in letters that were still slightly too large for him, glasses on straight. He was holding nothing, He was standing with his weight centered and his hands at his sides, and he was looking at Natasha on the floor with a quality of attention that was not distress and not calculation, but something that preceded both, the still moment of a system receiving input and determining response, very fast, without noise. Then he looked at the two gray-robed men. The ambient reading in Tony's gauntlet display went from baseline to compound event threshold in 1.3 seconds, not explosively. Not with sound or light, or any of the dramatic signatures Tony associated with power discharges. The workshop hum that Harry carried, the frequency that had always been just below registrable, the resonance that made instruments run slightly warm when he was near them, went from background to foreground in the way a quiet room went loud when a door opened into wind. Tony felt it in the gauntlet's field sensors. He felt it on his skin mildly, like air pressure before thunder. He watched Harry look at the men. Both gray-robed men went up, not fast, not thrown. The word that JARVIS would use in its incident report later was placed. They rose to the ceiling at a velocity that suggested something deliberate and considered rather than explosive, something that had thought about where it was putting them and at what height and with what force was appropriate to secure without damage. They hit the ceiling at a speed that would leave them bruised and certain and not concussed, and they stayed there, arms out, the specific geometry of the hold oriented so they could not reach their wands, which had already left their hands. One wand hit the floor. Clint's hand appeared from the mezzanine level above the reception desk and caught the other before it landed. Nobody had heard him arrive. He had been there for at least 8 minutes, which JARVIS confirmed, and which meant he dropped through the building's ductwork the moment the lobby alert came in, because Clint always knew where the window was, and the window was always wherever he'd already positioned himself. The lobby was quiet. Umbridge was the color of uncooked pastry. She was looking at the ceiling where her 2 enforcement officers were pinned with a precision that was worse, somehow, than violence. It was too controlled, too considered, too much evidence of a mind that had looked at the situation and made a specific choice about outcomes. She looked at Harry. Harry looked back. He was 5 years old and bare feet, and he was not frightened of her, not performing unfright. Not managing fear into a functional shape. He was simply, factually, standing in the lobby of his building and looking at a woman who had come to take him somewhere and had made the catastrophic tactical error of hurting someone he lived with, and he had responded to that with the precision of someone who knew what they were doing and had made decisions about how much of it to use. He attacked Natasha, Harry said. His voice was exactly as quiet as it always was, carrying exactly as much space as it needed to carry. "I need you to leave now." Umbridge opened her mouth. He said leave, Natasha said. She was sitting up. The stun had hit her at partial power. The aim had been past Steve. The distance and angle had cost it, and she was running a post-event assessment with the smooth self-inventory of someone who had been hit before and knew how to determine quickly what still worked. She looked at Harry from the floor and gave him one nod, the economical one, the one that meant something specific between them, and had been built over 17 coloring sessions and 32 games of What Do You Notice, and the low, unhurried accumulation of all the times Natasha had been in a room with Harry and chosen to be actually in it. The nod said, "Correct call, I see you." Umbridge looked at the ceiling again. She looked at Tony, whose gauntlet was still charged and aimed at the place the hex had come from. She looked at Steve, who had not moved from the position he'd been in since the wand came up, shield on arm, weight forward, the posture of someone who has decided the room is his and has the structural stubbornness to make that true. She looked at Clint on the mezzanine, who had both wands now and was examining them with the professional interest of someone cataloging new weapons. She looked at Harry one more time. Harry was still looking at her. He was not going to look away first. This was not adolescent defiance. It was not performed toughness. It was a 5-year-old who had made a decision about where he was and what he would protect and was communicating that decision through the medium of not moving. "This matter is far from concluded," Umbridge said, in a voice that had no more warmth in it than a policy document. "The Ministry of Magic has resources, authorities, and legal mechanisms that—" "Leave," Harry said. She left. At the door she turned once, which was the turn of someone who needed the last word badly enough to frame the retreat as a choice. She said nothing. She left. The door closed. On the ceiling, both men descended with the same deliberate, nonviolent rate at which they'd risen, reaching the floor in a controlled deceleration that deposited them upright and disoriented, and without injury. They looked at each other. They looked at Harry. They left quickly in the direction of the door without their wands, and the lobby was still. Tony pulled the gauntlet down. Harry sat on the floor. He did it the way Tony had done it in the workshop 3 weeks ago, not dramatically, just efficiently, the moment when legs transmit an opinion without consulting the higher functions. He was on the floor of the lobby with his knees up and his back against the reception desk, and the MIT sweatshirt had ridden up at one side, and his glasses had gone slightly crooked again, and he looked like what he was, a 5-year-old who had just done something enormous and was now processing the weight of having done it. Tony sat next to him. He did not decide to. He was next to Harry on the lobby floor before the decision had been processed, which was information, catalogued and set aside. Natasha was on her feet, fully operational, jacket brushed down, her assessment apparently complete and satisfactory. She looked at the two of them on the floor. That was precise, she said. I was aiming, Harry said. I know, she crouched down to their level. Are you all right? Harry thought about this with complete honesty, which was something he had started doing 3 weeks ago, the very gradual process of treating the question as a real question rather than a social formula. I think so, he said. He paused. I didn't want to hurt them. I just needed them to stop. You didn't hurt them, Natasha said. You placed them, that's different. Harry turned this over. Bruce will want to see the readings, he said. Bruce is already pulling the readings, Tony said. He'll be worried about how high they went. He'll be impressed, Tony said. Both, probably, in that order. He looked at the ceiling where the men had been. That was Harry, that was very good. Harry looked at the ceiling too. Something in his face moved, the quick brightness that came and tried to stay and was still learning to stay. I came down, Harry said. Yeah, Tony said. You said to stay upstairs. Nobody said that, Tony said. Harry looked at him. We said we'd handle it, Tony said. You handled it too, he paused. Those aren't the same instruction. Harry thought about this for a moment. Then he nodded once, with the quality of someone accepting a distinction that would require further examination at a later time. He looked at his hands in his lap, at the lobby floor, at the front door, through which Umbridge had left in the direction of what Tony already understood was a next step rather than an end. She'll come back, Harry said. Yeah, with more people, probably, and different arguments. Definitely different arguments, Tony said. Pepper is very interested in that. She's been building something for the past 72 hours, and she has the look she gets when a legal strategy has multiple stages. Harry considered this. What about the other kind, the non-legal kind? Tony glanced at Natasha, at Clint on the mezzanine, who had climbed down and was examining the confiscated wand with the focused interest of someone who understood the engineering. At Steve, who was standing near the door with his shield back in its compact form, and the particular set of his face that meant he was building positions he did not intend to abandon. You pinned 2 of them to the ceiling from across a lobby at 5 years old, Tony said. I have a suit, Natasha is. He looked at Natasha. Natasha confirmed. Clint knows where every exit in this building is. And 3 that aren't technically exits, Clint said from across the lobby. And Steve, Harry said. They both looked at Steve, who was looking at the door with the expression of someone composing a letter. Yeah, Tony said, and Steve. Harry was quiet for a moment, looking at each of them, not adding them up, reading them the way he read everything, with the full structural attention of someone who needed to understand not just the components but the relationships between them. 6, Harry said. 6, Tony confirmed. Harry picked up something from the floor next to him, his exercise book, which had been in his sweatshirt pocket and had apparently made the floor journey with him. He took his pencil from the spiral binding. He opened to a page and added something that Tony didn't look at, and JARVIS cataloged, what I have confirmed. Below it, a list. Tony looked at the list for 1 second and then back at the lobby ceiling and then at the front door. He thought about Umbridge's last look. He thought about this matter is far from concluded in the voice of someone who is not making a threat but stating a schedule. He thought about Natasha's dossier on Dumbledore, which she had mentioned once and not again, and which was therefore, by Natasha's operational grammar, something she was holding until the exact moment it was needed. He thought about the latch on the outside of the door. He opened the file, not all of it, just enough to know what was in it, which was a child and a cupboard and 17 discharge events, and a list of true things in green crayon, and 41 paces and pancakes, and the specific frequency of a workshop that ran warm when Harry was in it. He closed it again. He sat on the lobby floor and let it stay closed. The lab report was presented at 3 in the afternoon, at the communal table, with Bruce using the wall display and speaking in the measured cadences of someone who had gone through the data enough times to have resolved his initial response into something that could be communicated to other people. 17 pages, 3 supplemental appendices. The event profile is completely different from every previous discharge on record, Bruce said, pulling up a split-screen comparison. The jagged, reactive spikes from the Privet Drive records against today's reading, which was a different shape entirely, controlled, purposive, with a clear ascending curve and a clean, defined terminus. Previous events were reactive, emotional trigger, uncontrolled release, collateral output. What happened this morning was targeted application. He identified a threat vector, assessed required force, applied it, and released it cleanly when the threat was no longer active. He tapped the terminus on the graph. The release is particularly significant. He didn't hold it. He didn't need it to continue past the point of necessity. How high was the peak? Thor asked. He was eating something from the Asgardian gift box he'd brought back and paying attention with the combination of casual posture and absolute focus that was Thor's natural register. Asgardian combat event threshold, Bruce said. Level 3, he paused. He's 5 years old and his peak output is sitting at level 3 Asgardian combat event equivalent. Thor considered this. When I was 5, he said, I summoned a small thunderstorm over the palace training ground because one of Father's generals told me I held my sword incorrectly. He paused. I also could not reliably summon the thunderstorm on purpose. It was connected to my feelings about the sword criticism rather than to any developed capacity. He looked at the graph. This is different. Yes, Bruce said, this is different. His magical output is responsive to his intention rather than his emotional state. He chose the response. He chose the force level. He chose when to stop. He looked at the table. That is a level of control that most adult practitioners in any framework don't achieve. What does it mean developmentally? Steve asked. It means his magical capacity is growing into his control rather than ahead of it, which is either natural or the result of 3 weeks of proximity to a field of very disciplined, very powerful individuals. Bruce took his glasses off and put them on the table. I think it's both. I think his magical output is calibrating to its environment. He paused, which means it's going to keep developing, and it's going to keep calibrating, and whatever we give him to calibrate against is going to shape what it becomes. The table was quiet. We're his environment, Clint said. We're his environment, Bruce confirmed. Steve looked at the split-screen graph. The privet drive spikes against this morning's clean, controlled arc. He looked at them for a long time. Good, he said. Everyone looked at him. I mean it, Steve said. It means we're doing something right. It means the environment we've made here is giving him something to work with. He paused. We keep doing that. Nobody argued with it because it was true and because Steve had a quality, in moments like this, of saying the true thing with enough weight that adding to it would be redundant. There's one more finding, Bruce said. He pulled up the biometric panel, Harry's readings from the lobby, overlaid with his established baseline. His heart rate during the event elevated by 14 beats per minute, Bruce said. From 68 to 82, he looked at the table. The rest of the room, for comparison, Tony peaked at 170. I was at 194. Clint was at 112, which is very good. Steve was at 91. Natasha was at 76, Natasha said. Bruce looked at her. 76, he confirmed. Harry was at 82. He was the second calmest person in the lobby. Clint pointed at Natasha. You only beat a 5-year-old by 6 beats. Yes, Natasha said without expression. That's going to go on your file. It is not going on my file. JARVIS? Absolutely not, JARVIS said. Bruce sat down. He wrapped both hands around his tea mug and looked at the display at the clean arc of Harry's morning. He's going to be extraordinary, Bruce said, not with excitement and not with fear. With the precise weight of someone making an accurate observation about something they intend to treat with appropriate seriousness. He already is, Steve said. Harry was in the workshop at 6. Not the middle of the night arrival this time. He'd been there since 4:30, when Tony had found him on the threshold again. And this time Tony had not said you can come in because Harry had already been coming in for 3 weeks, and the threshold was administrative at this point. He just moved over and Harry had followed him to the bench. They'd worked through 2 gauntlet calibration problems and 1 theoretical framework expansion of the morning's event that Harry had begun in his exercise book, and Tony had started annotating before he'd fully decided to. The annotations had grown. The framework was now 4 pages of Harry's careful printing and Tony's faster, less legible expansion notes, and it was genuinely good work, the intuitive structural insight and the technical vocabulary meeting each other in the middle. Now the framework was closed, and Harry was sitting on the bench with his legs dangling, and Tony was on the stool, and they were in the post-work quiet that had become its own thing, its own texture, the part of the evening where the productivity was done and what was left was just the room. Tony turned the microquill in his fingers. He did this sometimes when he was working through something, not a nervous habit, more like a calibration tick, the physical analog of a mental process. She said I was a weapon, Harry said. Tony put the coil down, he picked it up again. She said unregistered magical entity, he said, which is the language they use for people they want to manage. He paused. It's the kind of language that makes a person into a category. She meant weapon, Harry said. She said dangerous and escalating and omega classification. Those are weapon words. He looked at his hands. I heard what she said about the handler report, about satisfactory. He paused. I didn't know someone from the ministry had been to the house. Tony held the coil. They checked on you, he said. Once, probably. Filed a form, he paused again. It was not the right thing to do. No, Harry said, with the flat acknowledgement of someone who had processed this long before today and had arrived at its correct categorization. He looked at the bench, but she wasn't entirely wrong about what I am. She was wrong about most of it. I am dangerous, Harry said. He said it with the directness of someone stating a fact they'd verified personally. I can feel how much. I could feel this morning that I was using a fraction of it, and the fraction was already. He moved his hand in a small arc. More than enough. Tony looked at him. Yeah, Tony said. You're powerful, that's true. Doesn't that make her right about the weapon part? Tony considered this carefully, because Harry was listening with his whole architecture, and the answer was going to be added to his working framework for understanding himself, and it mattered that the answer was accurate. A scalpel is dangerous, Tony said. It can do enormous damage if it's used without care, but a scalpel isn't a weapon, it's a tool. The difference isn't in the capacity for damage. It's in the intention and the knowledge and the decision about when and how much. He paused. This morning you aimed, you calibrated, you stopped cleanly. That's not a weapon doing what weapons do. That's someone making decisions. Harry turned this over in the way he turned everything thoroughly at the angles that mattered. You could have put them through the floor, Tony said. You could have put them through 3 floors. I have readings. I know what you were working with this morning. He looked at Harry's hands. You put them on the ceiling and held them there and let them down when they cleared the door. That's not what a weapon does, that's what a person does. Harry was quiet for a long time. Bruce said my nervous system runs a suppression protocol, he said. Tony looked at him. I heard part of the meeting, Harry said, not apologetically. JARVIS carries sound in this building, and I was on the residential stairs at 4 o'clock. JARVIS, Tony said. The acoustics on the residential staircase are genuinely complex, JARVIS said. I take some responsibility. Tony looked at the ceiling briefly and then back at Harry. What else did you hear? That I'm calibrating to the environment. Harry paused. That you're my environment. Another pause, different in quality. I like that, he said simply. That's a good thing to be. Tony set the coil down on the bench and left it there. The suppression protocol, he said. Bruce is right that it's there. But he's also right that it's not a permanent thing. It's what you learned to do, and it kept you safe, and now you're somewhere where it doesn't need to run at full capacity all the time. He paused. That takes a while to learn. You've had it running for a long time. How long did it take you? Harry said. Tony looked at him. You have one, Harry said, a different kind. But you have one. He was not challenging. He was not performing perception. He was stating something he'd observed over 3 weeks and had been waiting for the correct moment to name. I've been watching how you work. Tony was quiet for a moment. Longer than I'd like, he said. I'm still working on it. Harry nodded. He filed this with the care he gave to things that were both useful and true. Okay, he said. Then I'll work on it too. He picked up his pencil. He added something to the exercise book, not the framework, a different page, the one Tony had not looked at directly in the lobby, and closed it and tucked it into his sweatshirt pocket. Can I try the gauntlet? He said. You can try the gauntlet, Tony said, and lifted it off the bench, and they spent the next hour doing what they did in the evenings, working, calibrating, finding the frequencies. Thor told Harry the story at 9. It had evolved considerably from the version Tony had heard previewed on day 1, which had been a summary about a second son with dark hair and green eyes, and a gift that alarmed the court. The current version had chapters. It had a structure. It had specific recurring details that had been refined through nightly telling over 3 weeks, in the manner of a story that was being made in parallel with its own meaning. Tonight's chapter involved the young prince discovering that his gift was not only for moving things, but for understanding the architecture of things, seeing how systems connected, feeling when components were wrong, knowing through a quality of attention that his tutors called otherworldly and his brother called useful. Keep doing that. I need you to look at this mechanism. Harry was in the bed with the blanket up, and his glasses on the nightstand, and his exercise book on the pillow beside him, which was where it slept. He was listening with his eyes at the middle distance, the way he listened to things that mattered not at Thor, but at the story. Did the court stop being alarmed? Harry said, when Thor paused for the narrative breath that preceded a significant development. Not entirely, Thor said. Courts are in the business of alarm. But his brother stopped being alarmed because his brother understood, eventually, after some difficulty, that a gift of that nature was not dangerous to him. It was for him, he paused. And when someone's gift is for you rather than against you, alarm becomes something else. Harry looked at the ceiling. Thor, he said, yes, is this story going to have a good ending? Thor looked at him with the expression he wore when he was deciding how true to be about something that was both true and complicated. Some parts of it are very good, Thor said. And some parts are very hard, but the hard parts are earlier in the story than where you are now. Harry thought about this. Where am I in the story? He said. Thor looked at him for a long moment, at the exercise book on the pillow, at the glasses on the nightstand, at the 5-year-old in the bed in a building full of people who had spent 3 weeks demonstrating, in the specific, concrete, non-declarative way of people who knew better than to use words for things that needed to be shown, that they intended to be a consistent feature of the architecture. You are, Thor said very carefully, at the chapter where things begin to go right, and they will still go wrong sometimes, because that is the grammar of a good story and also of a good life, but this, he gestured at the room, at the tower around it, at the city outside going on in its indifferent abundance, is the beginning of the going right. Harry was quiet. He pulled the exercise book off the pillow and opened it in the dark without his glasses and held it for a moment, the way you held something when you didn't need to read it, just needed it in your hands. Then he put it back. Okay, he said. He closed his eyes. Thor sat in the dark room while the city held the building, and Harry Potter, age 5, of Avengers Tower, New York City, resident 22 days, calibrating to his environment, precise and extraordinary and entirely unaware of the full extent of either, fell asleep. His breathing evening out, his hands, which had held everything carefully all day, the pencil, the gauntlet, the exercise book, the knowledge of what he was capable of and what he had chosen to do with it, going open. Downstairs, Tony was at the bench with the framework they'd built together, extending it into a third page in the margin of the original napkin problem. Steve was in his sketchpad, working from 3 weeks of committed observation. Bruce was writing a fourth appendix to his 17-page report and labeling it, with typical Bruce precision, preliminary notes on environmental calibration as a developmental mechanism, implications. Natasha was reading the Dumbledore file with the focused attention of someone preparing for a specific use, at a specific time, to be determined. Clint was in the East Wing vent, investigating the cold spot with a thermal scanner Harry had described, and a note that read, in the careful large printing, check bracket repositioning, third junction from the east wall. H. The scanner confirmed it immediately. Clint lay in the ductwork in the dark building and read the note twice and put it in his pocket and stayed there for a while, doing nothing in particular. The owl was on Harry's windowsill. It had been there every night since the first, uncaged, entirely voluntary, its presence a continuous election. The adoption paperwork was filed in 3 jurisdictions and was real, and was moving through the systems that process such things, and Pepper Potts' specialist in magical human jurisdictional law had sent her 4th communication of the day to the Ministry of Magic's legal department at 7:15 this evening, and the ministry's legal department had not yet replied, which Pepper's specialist described as very informative. Umbridge was writing a report in London. Tony had JARVIS monitoring the outgoing communications of the ministry's enforcement division, because Tony did not wait for things to happen to him if monitoring was an available option, and the report was being written and would be filed and would result in a next step, because it was far from concluded, and everyone understood that. But it was 9:15 in New York, and Harry was asleep, and the building was full. The story was exactly where Thor said it was, at the chapter where things begin to go right. It was not the end, it was not close to the end. There was a ministry with resources and mechanisms, and a woman who believed that administration was a form of power, and there was a prophecy in a file that Natasha was reading for the 3rd time this week, and there was a name, Voldemort, in the encrypted records that Tony had not yet opened fully, in the file that had been growing for 3 weeks, and that he would open when he was ready and not before. But it was 9:15, and Harry was asleep, and 6 people in a tower in New York had spent 22 days building something out of dinners and vent exploration and frequency calibration and bedtime sagas and one nod. The specific nod, the one that meant correct call, I see you, building it without announcement and without ceremony, the way things were built that were meant to hold. It was, by any honest accounting, a beginning.